Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you are new to my channel, hello, my name is Gabby and welcome. If you've never been here before, never watched any of my videos, have no idea what I do here on my channel, I cover true crime cases, and all of the cases that I cover are a little bit older. They're all basically 20 years or older. So if that's something that you might be interested in, maybe go down below, click that subscribe button, and also make sure to turn on the post notifications to be notified every time that I upload. So in today's video, we are going to be covering a case that I have been wanting to cover for so long on my channel, and that is the murder of Dorothy Jane Scott, a case that has been widely covered here on YouTube, but just as much requested for me to cover. When I started looking into Dorothy's case, I realized that a fellow true crime researcher who I have worked with previously before for videos dove very deep into her case. And I ended up finding out that he was actually pretty much the first person who did a really extensive deep dive into her case. That is Anthony, who runs the blog Crime Blogger 1983. And in my opinion, he does some of the best research online, and he cares so deeply about getting to the bottom of every case that he covers. And another thing that I really respect about him is that at the end of all his case write-ups, he always does a little bit of his thoughts on the case, and he's very blunt when he writes them out, and that's just something that I adore about the type of research that he does. Pretty much most of the information that you hear about this case originally came from research that Anthony did. He even developed a friendship with Dorothy's son, and he was flown out for the episode of On the Case with Paula Zahn regarding this case. So pretty much as soon as I decided that I was going to do a video on Dorothy's case, I reached out to Anthony and asked him if he kind of wanted to do a little bit of a collaboration again on my channel. He was all for it, which I'm very excited about. Thank you, Anthony, for taking a little bit of time out of your busy schedule to work on a video with me. With all that being said, this is the murder of Dorothy Jane Scott. Dorothy Jane Scott was born on April 23rd of the year 1948 in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, to parents Vera and Jacob Scott. She was described by loved ones as being a kind-hearted and compassionate person, also religious and a bit quiet. She was a beauty who mostly kept to herself. In the year 1980, she was 32 years old and a single mother living with her only child, her son, Sean, and her aunt in Stanton, California. Her son mostly went by his nickname, Sean. He was born to Dorothy and his father, Dennis Terry, on January 23rd of 1976. At this time in 1980, Dorothy was working as a secretary at two different places. One was Swinger's Psych Shop, and she was also working at Custom John's Head Shop, joint shops both located in Anaheim, California. Swinger's Psych Shop was said to, in particular, appeal to the ones who adored the hippie culture. They sold things like beads, incense, and lava lamps. Dorothy's father actually used to own this store, and it had been later purchased by a man named John Kosala, who also owned Custom John's Head Shop. So he owned that store, and I guess he just wanted to buy the other one as well. Both stores she worked at back in the day are no longer in business. Now, Dorothy was the type of person who people enjoyed being around. She was calm, laid back. She was very likable. She wasn't someone who liked to attract too much attention to herself, and it was said that although she was a single mother, she didn't really have any interest in dating at the time. She was known as very reliable and responsible. She was committed to her faith and stuck to her usual schedule. She didn't drink or do any drugs. She would have much rather preferred a night in rather than one out on the town. Her main focus was really her son, Sean. She desired to live a normal life, but someone interrupted that plan, creating much frustration for the young woman sometime beginning in that same year of 1980. Dorothy started receiving harassing phone calls, anonymous ones at that, almost on the regular. She thought the voice sounded a bit familiar, but could never pinpoint who exactly it was. So it was most likely someone she had met before, but didn't talk to on the regular. Whoever it was that kept calling her was one second very sweet to her, and the next second out to do nothing but torment her. Each call from this person was completely different. One second claiming that he loved her and that she was the love of his life, and the next second he was saying that he was going to kill her and going into great detail about how he was going to do it. During one of those tormenting calls, this unknown male caller said the words, "Okay, now you're going to come my way, and then when I get you alone, I will cut you up into bits so no one will ever find you. Yeah, it was horrible, and it absolutely terrified her, as it would most anyone in her predicament. This was the phone call that Dorothy's mother claimed put the most fear in her. This caller was obsessed with Dorothy, and he was not bluffing. He would sit on the phone and tell her all about what she did that day, even telling her what she had been wearing. He knew in great detail about her life, so it definitely was somebody who was close to her and watching her daily. Whoever it was making these phone calls had been stalking her daily, or at least was receiving some sort of information from someone who had seen her nearly every day. These calls completely took over Dorothy's life. She feared for her safety and her son's safety. Dorothy did not feel safe at home, at work, at her parents' home, walking from the car to any building. She felt like eyes were on her at every single moment. She started taking up karate and even highly considered buying a gun. One time, this caller had told her to look outside, that he left a gift for her. When she looked outside, she saw on the hood of her car was a single dead rose. Anyone who has had a stalker in their life knows this fear, and it's a type of gut-wrenching fear that no one should ever have to go through in life. Dorothy had a feeling that something was going to happen, that this person would actually end up doing the things to her he claimed he was going to do. Dorothy felt like something bad was going to happen soon, and it did. The date in discussion is May 28th of 1980, and nothing was too out of the ordinary on this day. She had a meeting to go to that night at 9 p.m. at Swingers. Although some reports claim she dropped her son off at her parents' home beforehand, she actually took her son to the meeting that night with her. Well, during this meeting, a fellow employee of hers named Conrad Bostrom became very ill. Dorothy was a caring person, so she went over to her coworker and asked him if he was okay. The way he responded told her that he definitely wasn't. Apparently there had been a bit of red swelling on his arm, and he was also becoming very physically ill, not feeling too well, kind of feeling like he had a fever going on. Dorothy told everyone at the meeting that the meeting was over for the night and that she was going to be taking Conrad to the hospital to get him checked out. Another coworker of theirs, a woman named Pam Head, decided to go along with them to help. They knew that they were probably going to be at the hospital for a bit of time, so on the way to the hospital, Dorothy decided to drop her son off at her parents' home. Her parents' home was located on West Stony Brook, which was not far from her places of work, so this made it very easy for her parents to watch Sean while she worked or had a meeting, or anytime she just needed them to watch him in general. She dropped Sean off at her parents' home and told them that she was taking Conrad to the hospital and would be back to pick Sean up after. During this quick pit stop, it was said that she did change her scarf. She switched from a black one to a red one. The reasoning for this is really unknown. It is said that her mother told her to switch scarves. Maybe this one just went better with her outfit. Who knows? It's just a small detail. Dorothy was also wearing blue Levi's, a brown one-piece bathing suit with straps, a multicolored satin shirt, and rust-colored shoes. Dorothy, Conrad, and Pam arrived at UC Irvine Medical Center, and Conrad was immediately checked in. It was said by Pam that during the time Conrad was being checked out, that Dorothy was never by herself. The two were together the entire time. Sometime later, Conrad comes out and tells them that they found out what the red swelling had come from, and it had come from a spider bite, one from a black widow. The venom from a black widow spider affects your nervous system and can cause symptoms like stiffening of your muscles, nausea, stomach pain, excessive sweating, rash, weakness, and tremors. So no wonder he was feeling so horribly. He was treated for the spider bite and given a prescription. He was discharged from the hospital at around 11 p.m., so they were there for about 2 hours. There was a pharmacy at the hospital, and Conrad and Pam went to fill his prescription. While Conrad and Pam were waiting in line, Dorothy stated that she was going to grab her car and bring it around to the front of the hospital so the two of them didn't have to walk. Dorothy made a quick stop at the woman's restroom and then went outside to retrieve her car. This would be the last time that the two of them would see her alive. After Conrad and Pam were done filling the prescription, they went to the bathroom themselves and then went outside expecting Dorothy to be right out front waiting for them. She wasn't. Minutes ticked by and they were confused as to where she could be. About 20 minutes went by and they spotted her white 1973 Toyota station wagon coming towards them, or so they thought it was her station wagon. This car, though, was coming towards them a little too fast. They couldn't see who was inside. Pam told Anthony during his interview with her that although reports claimed that the car's high beams were on, the car's lights were not on. She told Anthony she is not 100% sure if the car that they witnessed was in fact Dorothy's or not. The car came towards them very fast and then whipped out of the parking lot and left. The two of them at the time stood there completely confused. According to one very early article that covers this case, it was said that a car was in front of the car thought to be Dorothy's and went in the same direction as the car that they thought was Dorothy's. This information, though, was not mentioned ever again in another article. In the spot where Dorothy's car had been parked, though, in the hospital parking lot, there had been an empty pack of cigarettes left behind. It is still unknown if this has any relation to her case or not. Conrad and Pam said that they went back inside of the hospital to wait when they realized the car was not turning around to come back, if it was in fact Dorothy's, which we still do not know. This was a time before cell phones, so they couldn't just call her and see what was going on. The two waited at the hospital for a few hours to see if she was going to show back up. According to them, they believed that maybe she had some sort of emergency regarding her son and had to rush over to her parents' home to take care of it. After several hours of waiting, they decided to phone Dorothy's parents and see if Dorothy had shown back up there or if something serious had happened. Her parents told them that Dorothy never came back to their house. You may be wondering how they knew her parents' number. Well, to explain that, after John Kosela bought swingers from Dorothy's father was a usual handyman around the shop. Anytime anything needed fixin', he was the guy. So everyone who worked at Swingers knew his home phone number by heart. They all decided, especially based on the strange circumstances occurring hours before, that they needed to contact the police. They did, but based on the fact that Dorothy was an adult, authorities didn't seem too worried about it at this time. Authorities believed Dorothy just hopped in her car, left, and would maybe show up eventually. She was an adult, she was allowed to do whatever she wanted to do. Well, at about 4:30 a.m. on May 29th, Dorothy's car was located. Her car was found in an alleyway in Santa Ana, about 10 miles from the hospital. It wasn't just abandoned though, it was set on fire. Police didn't seem too worried about Dorothy's disappearance before, but they sure were now, and they told her parents to not talk to any media during their initial investigation. Dorothy's parents were told that this could interfere with any progress of theirs when it came to finding Dorothy. Because of this, nothing was really reported on her case for the first week. For a week, the case didn't really go anywhere, but after that first week, calls came in. The terrorizing post-disappearance calls. Dorothy's mother, Vera, was home alone one day when she received a call on her home phone. She walked over to answer it. A male voice was on the other end and asked, "Are you related to Dorothy Scott?" Vera's mother replied, "Yes." The caller said, "I've got her," and then hung up. A chill ran down her spine. She remembered the calls from the man who terrorized her daughter, and she knew this was him, and this was most likely the person responsible for what happened to her daughter. It was just all too coincidental. Vera and Jacob Scott waited around for a week, hoping for some updates in their daughter's case, but it seemed like nothing was coming of it. They were a little fed up at this point and decided it was time to contact the media in some way. They reached out to the Santa Ana Register, and a story was immediately ran in the paper regarding Dorothy's disappearance. That same day the article was ran in the Santa Ana Register, the story editor, Pat Riley, started receiving calls as well. Pat Riley answered the phone one day and a male voice said, "I killed her," and then went on to say, "I killed Dorothy Scott. She was my love. I caught her cheating with another man. She denied having someone else. I killed her." Could this just have been someone who read about her case in the paper and wanted to prank call the editor? Well, this person knew details that had not been released to the public, like the fact that Dorothy had been wearing a red scarf and that Conrad had suffered a spider bite. How could they have known this? This person claimed that Dorothy had phoned them while she was at the hospital. But the thing is that when Pam was asked about this, Pam said that Dorothy was next to her the entire time and that she didn't make a phone call at the hospital at any time while she was there. Pat Riley informed Dorothy's parents of this phone call. Dorothy did not have a boyfriend from what they knew. This call most likely came from her stalker. Stalkers are sometimes so delusional that they create this entire relationship with a person in their head, and this becomes their reality. A stalker this far from actuality is dangerous. They believed this caller was the same caller that had been calling Dorothy for months and was most likely her abductor. If this person abducted her that night, it wouldn't have been hard to know she had been wearing a red scarf, and he could have asked her during the abduction why she was at the hospital, and she could have told him about Conrad's spider bite. Calls that started out as occurring for months turned into years. The calls happened every Wednesday at her parents' home. This person knew Vera and Jacob's routine, and he made sure to always call earlier in the day while Jacob was at work and Vera was at home alone. One time though, he did call a bit later and Jacob answered. After Jacob answered that time, the calls stopped for the time being. Vera was always the one taking the calls. For 4 years, every time Vera answered, she just hoped the man would give some sort of information to her that would be helpful in finding out what happened to her daughter. This caller would always say similar things though. Things along the lines of, "I've got her, I killed her, and is Dorothy there?" These calls were always just so short, it would have been impossible for police to track them, and this caller knew that. Law enforcement did wiretap the phone though and had recordings of his voice, a voice that was obviously a disguise. You could tell the man was trying to make himself sound different than he normally spoke. Her parents had offered a $2,500 reward for any information that led to the discovery of Dorothy, whether that be alive or dead. On August 6th of 1984, a construction worker located human bones and dog bones side by side in some brush off of Santa Ana Canyon Road in Anaheim, California. Here are some photos Anthony of Crime Blogger 1983 had taken of roughly the location where her skeletal remains had been located. With the remains, they also found a turquoise ring and a watch. This ring and watch were used to help identify the remains as possibly being that of Dorothy Jane Scott, because Vera immediately recognized them. The watch had stopped at 12:30 a.m. of May 29th of 1980, which was about an hour after Conrad and Pam last saw Dorothy. Dental records were compared and it confirmed their beliefs. The skeletal remains belonged to Dorothy. Dorothy's cause of death could not be determined. The bones had been charred, but this was guessed to not be in connection to her death, even though her car had been left in flames. A fire had swept through the area about 2 years earlier, and this is most likely what caused this charring.
I was flown out that last May, I believe. Time flies. I think it was last May. And we filmed in Anaheim. I was able to visit the site where Dorothy's body was found. I was able to meet in person finally Dorothy's son, Sean. Great guy. We still talk frequently. He's got a great family, met them as well.
Although this is where her remains were found, it is not believed this is where the killer originally discarded them. Heavy rains in the area could have caused them to travel a bit. Also, we have to take into consideration animals possibly moving parts of the remains as well. They were bones, and there's a bit of wildlife in that area. The dog bones, now this is very confusing to a lot of people because Dorothy never owned a dog. They could be that of the killer's dog, we don't know. Some believe that maybe the dog bones were used because Dorothy's killing was some sort of a ritual that maybe also included a canine. Some believe that maybe the dog bones were thrown there to confuse someone who may come across them and not notify authorities thinking it was just a dog. I don't know how much I believe that, considering there was an entire human skull there that definitely wouldn't be mistaken for a dog skull. Some think that a dead dog was possibly brought along too, so if anyone came across the killer burying something, the killer could just be like, oh, I'm burying my dead dog. In my opinion, I don't know how much the two are related. It is odd though. This is a complete sicko we're dealing with, so honestly, anything is possible. Back to Dorothy's bones. Some of them were missing. Her skeleton was not complete. It was only a partial discovery, which was a pelvis, an arm, 2 thighs, and her skull. This proves even more that they most likely came from a different location. The announcement of the discovery of her remains was ran in the paper, and while her loved ones grieved, they also received, once again, a phone call. The phone rang at the Scott home. Vera answered, and the caller asked, "Is Dorothy home?" and then hung up. After that, the phone calls stopped completely. A memorial service was held for Dorothy on August 22nd, and at this service, her brother was quoted saying, "To me, she exemplified the word give. She just give and give and give, no matter what it cost her. She spent her last hours giving and being concerned about others." Dorothy Jane Scott was laid to rest in Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Orange County, California. Dorothy's father would end up passing away at the age of 69 on April 23rd of 1994. Yeah, he passed away on his daughter's birthday. Dorothy's mother passed away at the age of 74 on December 17th of 2002. Dorothy's son, Sean, is grown and has a family of his own and helps in his mother's case any way that he can. He was so young when it happened, so he doesn't remember much about her, but has been told that she was an incredible person. Her murder occurred 42 years ago, and there have never been any solid suspects in her case, just people often talked about that lie under suspicion. Of course, one of the main people originally looked at was Dorothy's ex-husband. It was said that she had been visited by him in the few weeks prior to her murder. He lived in Missouri, so it was a little ways away. He, though, had a solid alibi and had been completely ruled out as having any involvement in her murder. The next individual is the owner of the stores that she worked at, John Kosola. Years after Dorothy's death, he had been indicted for federal charges regarding tax evasion. An LA Times article dated June 12th of 1996 stated, "The owner of an Anaheim business was indicted Tuesday on tax evasion charges. John H. Kosola, 48, owner of Custom John's General Store, was accused of filing returns for 2 years that falsely showed he had no taxable income." Her working at the stores he owns, he would have known her schedule, knew her phone number at home, and what she was wearing any day that she worked. But I feel like if it was the owner of the store she worked at, even with a bit of a disguised voice, she would have most likely been able to tell that it was him. It was also said that the land that Dorothy's remains were found on had been supposedly owned by John. But if he killed her and disposed of her remains, why would he have discarded them on his land? It is quite odd. Those are just some things to consider. The next person I will be mentioning is someone brought up online, someone that Anthony dove a bit into himself, and this was a man named Mike Brown. This is someone that law enforcement had been aware of at the time and someone that had been brought up to Dorothy's son years later. It is said that Mike Brown was a bit mentally unstable, and he lived in the San Diego mountains of California. It was also said that Mike had been involved in cult activity back in the day. Could this just be a rumor? Possibly. What was Mike's connection to Dorothy, though? Well, Mike's sister had worked with Dorothy at Swinger's Psych Shop, and it was said that he had an obsession with Dorothy. Police, though, never had enough evidence to tie Mike to any sort of crime involving this case. It was mostly just a lot of things said about him that made him look very suspicious. There was no legitimate evidence. It is mostly just word of mouth, and Mike passed away in 2014. Now, do I think that Dorothy had a stalker and that she coincidentally was murdered and the caller simply wanted to torment her loved ones because she wasn't around anymore? No. I think her stalker was the person who took her life. I think whoever this was had a disgusting, perverted obsession with her. I think it was someone close to her or who knew someone close to her who gave them information. This person was good at what they did, making sure not to be caught. Considering that the voice sounded somewhat familiar to Dorothy, I think she had spoken to this person in person before, and it was probably just a brief encounter. And that during this brief encounter, they developed an infatuation with her. Due to this caller never wanting to speak to her father on the phone, just her mother, I think this proves that maybe this person had spoken to her father before as well and feared that her father would recognize his voice. You could say that maybe it was a random customer of hers, but it was said that Dorothy usually worked in the back of the stores and had very little contact with customers at all. What we have to go off of from the night of Dorothy's disappearance is what Conrad and Pam have said regarding it. Some things Pam has said about that night has changed a bit here and there based on newspaper articles, but it has never been huge details in the case, and she has said that everything was a bit of a shock at the time, which could explain why little bits of information are different at times, and especially this case being 42 years old. I just personally wish that there was more information regarding her time at the hospital. There isn't really any information if anyone at the hospital in the parking lot saw anything that night. I mean, people are constantly coming and going in a hospital parking lot. Someone could have possibly seen something, but no one ever really came forward. Did anyone working there have anything to say at all? I couldn't find that information anywhere online. We just have what Pam and Conrad say happened, which I am in no way discrediting them, but it would help if there was just a little bit more information to go off of. Apparently, Dorothy's parents never suspected anyone who worked at Dorothy's places of work as having any involvement in her murder. But honestly, you never know. From everything I read about Dorothy, she was mostly either at home or at work. So whoever it was who had this obsession with her had to stem from either of these places. And I highly doubt it was her home. I would say that through the web of people, it was someone connected to her places of work, either one of those, whether that be someone employed there or having a close connection to someone employed there. That's just a personal opinion of mine though. I also personally think that someone with this sort of obsession doesn't just experience it once in life. If I had to guess, this person most likely would go on to do the same thing to someone else. Was this person stalking her so closely that he had followed her to the hospital late at night, and when he saw that she was walking to her car alone, he decided to strike? But when you think about it, if he followed her, where was his car? Was he possibly working with someone else? We don't know. Maybe he left his car at the hospital and came back for it later. There was no reports of a strange car left behind at the hospital from what I could find. But then again, some people go to the hospital and stay there for hours and hours and hours, stay there overnight, so maybe they wouldn't have noticed. Dorothy had been so terrified of this stalker at the time that it is honestly surprising that she decided to walk to her car by herself. Maybe she thought she would be safe in a hospital parking lot. If the stalker had followed her to the hospital and knew she was with two of her coworkers, did he really wait 2 hours to see if she was possibly going to come out of the building alone? It's just all so odd, and I feel like there's more when it comes to that night. More that we just don't know and may never know. Dorothy's father said in an interview that he feared they were dealing with a person who was very sick, and I couldn't agree more. Back in the early 1980s and before then, stalking was not taken as seriously as it is in today's time. And in my personal opinion, the case that really changed people's opinion of stalking and made everyone realize how severe it can get is the case of Rebecca Schaeffer, who was an actress who in 1989 was killed by her stalker. Stalking mostly put fear into the person experiencing it, and of course their loved ones who witnessed them going through it. But as a whole, police didn't take it as seriously, and it wasn't as talked about. If you are somebody who is experiencing stalking of your own, I am going to put some resources down below in the description of this video, some places you can possibly find help, because I know how scary it can be. Stalking, like I said before, is something that no person should ever have to deal with. You should never feel unsafe in your own home or going about your daily activities. For the end of my video, I asked Anthony if there was anything he wanted to say, so take it away.
Hello, this is Crime Blogger 1983. I just want to thank Gabby for going ahead and doing this collaboration with me on Dorothy Jane Scott's case. If you hadn't already seen my episode of Paula Zahn, it aired last October on this same case. It's called Web of Torment. I urge you to check it out. You can also check out my entries on Dorothy Jane Scott on my website at crimeblogger1983.blogspot.com. Before I did any of my research on this case, the only photo of Dorothy that was available was one from the newspaper, and it was very grainy, black and white. You couldn't tell much about her. And I contacted Sean and asked him if I could use some of the photos that he may have of his mom, and he sent me those. So anytime you see a photo of Dorothy anywhere, it came from my site. I've usually tried to put my logo on them. People take them off and don't credit my research. I get really irritated with that. Like I said, I'm not a guy that likes to pat himself on the back, but when you put a lot of work into a case, you want to be at least get credit for it. I really want to thank her for doing this. I think we can collaborate in the future. We've collaborated in the past on a few episodes, actually. But without her collaboration, this would not be possible. There's a couple other people I'd like to give a quick shout out to. One is my bestie, Leslie. She runs unsolvedappalachia.org. Check that out. Another is my oracle, Alana. She runs buriedcoldcases.com. So check that out. And the other one is Ed Densel. He hosts the podcast Unfound. Best podcast on missing persons there is. Check it out. I urge you. I was also able to meet both of the hosts of the Haunted History podcast, Kathy and her daughter, and I urge you to listen to their episode on Dorothy Scott. They did a great job, and like I said, I thank Gabby again, and I hope you enjoy the video. Thank you.
Thank you again, Anthony, for collaborating with me on this video. I always appreciate it. It is such a pleasure. And with all that being said, I will see you all in the next one. And by the next one, I mean my first video of Solved September. Do remember, next month, Solved September. So if you have any solved cases you possibly want me to cover here on my channel, make sure to send those over to gabulosiscaserequests@gmail.com.